Alright, so I figured I'd just do this one as its own video and do Spiral and Army of the Dead on kind of their own, on a separate one that one of these will go out first. But here, let's talk about Cruella, which is yet another live-action villain origin story that Disney's decided to put out for reasons unknown, apart from money, I guess. And as far as, like, going into this with expectations, naturally, Maleficent kind of... Back in 2014, Maleficent kind of set up this whole idea of, oh, it might be interesting for them to have a movie that focuses just on a famous Disney villain, and let's see how that happens. And there was a lot of build-up about how it surely be dark or something like that. And kind of take us in this different direction than we had seen, particularly having been already kind of drowning in those live-action remakes a little bit. But when Maleficent came out, it became clear that trying to make them sympathetic and the hero of their own story wasn't exactly working out. And its sequel didn't really... I saw the second Maleficent when it came out, and I don't even remember anything about it now. Like, really at all. I think Michelle Pfeiffer might have been in there, and that was pretty much the main addition. But here, now, they really promised what we thought Maleficent was going to be back in 2014, where it's like, oh no, she's definitely going to be a villain, it's definitely going to be darker, we're even going to bump it up a little bit in the rating department. All this PG stuff, no, we're going PG-13 now, which is really... So we're really amping it up now. And yeah, I mean, for Disney, yeah, PG-13 might be kind of a big deal compared to the stuff that we saw, like Maleficent, that was clearly in that PG category, but still, it's all about making the character somewhat sympathetic, even if this one maybe does a slightly better job of the whole she's got to stay a villain thing, she's got to eventually, you know, be the villain kind of thing. Despite the fact that they still make, kind of, I guess you would say, the same mistake of giving the movie another antagonist. And it's like, I would kind of like to see these, one of these villain origin stories just once, where they actually end up being the villain of their origin story. Hence it being a villain origin story, but, you know, whatever. Apparently only of all people, apparently only M. Night Shyamalan can pull off the villain origin story. He'll just fuck it up in the movie after it, but I'm getting sidetracked a lot here. So, we'll start with the fact that this was made by a director named Craig Gillespie, who did I, Tonya. He's done a number of things, but there's... As soon as you hear that there's a live-action Cruella movie from the director of I, Tonya, it's like... I can maybe see where they're going with this. Despite I, Tonya being a pretty R-rated movie, you could still kind of get the sense of what they might be doing with this, especially since they were going the whole 70s punk rock kind of thing. So we're going to do first off, the constant soundtrack thing. The thing that was so annoying in I, Tonya. That has now come here, where it's like, we're going to set up the punk rock thing as far as the soundtrack goes, and then the entire rest of the movie is just going to be just on shuffle. You know, whatever song comes up is what's going to be in this scene, whether it makes sense or not, and it's going to be the whole movie. So, while this constant soundtrack is going in the background that more or less has nothing to do with anything and only serves to be a distraction, is this backstory that starts... Actually, we get, like... Cruella gets maybe 3 origin stories in one. You can get the backstory you had when you were a child, you can get when you started at the bottom and you rose from the top, or you can get how another antagonist made you an antagonist. It's all of them. This movie's 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it takes its sweet-ass time doing every single one of those things. So we start off with her being a small child, and she has a traumatic incident involving Dalmatians that's a little over the top, But this ultimately leads her to being an orphan, pretty much. So she goes off on her own. She just kind of does it. Like it's it's one of those cases where this really, really over the top, dramatic, traumatic thing has happened to her. And rather than kind of like grieve, she gets a couple of scenes where she cries for like a second. But it's mostly oh, well, I guess I better leave now. I'll just hitch a ride in a truck and I'll go wherever the hell it takes me. And lo and behold, she goes and sits at a fountain where she meets two children who end up being Jasper and Horace, and they become best friends. And if you are as confused as I am about the idea of Cruella being best friends with Jasper and Horace, then I guess we're on the same page. But yeah, obviously there's going to be an evolution here of sorts. But in the meantime, the three of them are going to be these. It's kind of like the Paper Planes montage in Slumdog Millionaire on the train, where there's just children running around doing these things and committing these little crimes and surviving until they are adults, pretty much magically. So it's and then of course we have our second origin story, which is she's got to start at the bottom and go from the top. So if you want to say, oh, we're doing another live action remake, only it's 101 Dalmatians from a different side. Well, not exactly right away. First, we've got to get basically another remake of Cinderella. Because that's what you expect in a Cruella movie, I guess. So we get a really long montage because this is what the director does. Okay, he picks songs to go on the soundtrack, but you know when you watch a movie, oftentimes the song will be cut down because the scene is kind of condensed to a certain point. But not this director. What this director does is he says, "We paid for this song. We're playing the whole goddamn thing." This was really apparent with the way he used the chain in I, Tonya, where it was used for a montage, but then the song wasn't over and the scene was, so the song just like finished in the next scene, even though it served no purpose anymore. So we get a really long, repetitive montage of her cleaning and basically being Cinderella and being looked down on by the people that work in this department store where these really fashionable dresses and the like are sold. And of course she's like, I'm above this because I'm, this designing thing is what I do, but, oh, I'm just here to clean the toilets. As we see over and over and over again in a montage. Like, long after it's established this is what the point is, it just keeps fucking going. And it's a long-ass time before we get anywhere. And then finally, what must be like 45 minutes in, which may not even be an exaggeration, we have Emma Thompson now. And I was under the impression that Emma Thompson was in this. But I was kind of under the impression that maybe she'd be in, like, the early parts of the origin story. It'd be just, like, a small part. But no, she's a major character and our antagonist. And how I was talking about, oh, we're doing a Cinderella thing. And it's like, oh, we've seen this before. Well, we're not done with movies we've already seen before. Now we're gonna get... because remember, what these movies kind of like to do, or at least what that trend was at one point, was to say, oh, we're going to tell you this story, but it's not the story you think you know. They didn't quite outright say that this time, but if they had, it would have been an absolute blatant lie in a sense, because it's not just them telling us a story we don't know, it's telling us different stories that have nothing to do with this story that we already know. So once she's under the wing of Emma Thompson, it's just The Devil Wears Prada. Like, there's no other way to describe it. That's just literally what the movie is for a long time when she's with Emma Thompson, finally. And I saw a lot of comments say the same thing. The joke of, The Devil Wears Prada. I saw that comment multiple times before I saw the movie. But I did not take into account just how much of this movie is The Devil Wears Prada. It's a fucking lot of it. And then finally, she's like, oh, I need to get revenge for something that's revealed about midway through. And then she kind of starts doing the Cruella thing, which is hinted at in the opening scenes when she's a child. Because apparently, I referenced Split a little bit ago. Well, she appears to have multiple personalities or something. She's her regular character, the sort of Cinderella type that's really timid and has like the red hair. And then she has her other side, who she's kind of been suppressing this whole time, her mother actually calls Cruella. And so she's going to become that other personality that she has. And then it's like the Superman Clark Kent thing. And now the one that's supposedly the real her is now just the disguise, and Cruella is actually who she is. And all that. And then it finally gets to a point to where the movie somewhat gets interesting for a little bit. And it becomes, like, her whole point of vengeance is to become a fashion icon that overshadows Emma Thompson's character. And so we just see this fashion war going on. And this is where one of the big compliments you'll probably hear this movie getting a lot is its costume design, which, naturally. But yeah, for real, the creativity in a lot of these scenes and how they reveal it. There's a reveal in particular involving a trash truck that I honestly would have never seen coming. So this middle portion here with this fashion war between her and Thompson is like really good, and what like the movie probably should have been mostly. But it's just basically this middle portion more or less. And occasionally it's this sort of heist, might be a stretch, but it's a heist-like kind of thing, where they, like, steal shit from her, and Jasper and Horace have these plans to do that. If there's one part of the soundtrack that actually kind of works, there is Joe Texas' song, I Gotcha, comes in twice. Once as like kind of a setup really briefly, and then there's kind of a payoff that it's the same thing later. And they actually made the soundtrack kind of a joke in this instance, which was really funny and kind of clever. But no, apart from that, the soundtrack is extremely distracting literally the whole time. Like there's even a point in time where they use Car Wash for a reason that I cannot figure out. Like, it doesn't matter at all. Just songs needed to be happening, but I could go on all day about that. Actually, there's one more thing I gotta say about the music. I didn't know until the end credits that the composer who did the score is Nicholas Britell, who's probably one of the best composers working right now. And he's done, like he did, Vice and Barry Jenkins' movies and the theme from Succession. And the reason I especially bring this up is because when you listen to the scores for, like, Vice and Succession, they have this way of sounding, like, regal, but sinister at the same time. And that's pretty much perfect for this. He would have probably been the perfect composer for this, except for the fact that I honestly can't remember a single note of score at all. It's all the songs. So that's a big waste, and something that could have really enhanced the movie also, but whatever. Every now and then we do have stuff that comes back that kind of reminds us of, like, the animated movie. Like, the way that, we learn that the reason she drives like a psychopath is because she just literally can't drive. Like, she's never driven before. We get the moment when, Horace has the moment, the opening of the animated movie, when it's like the dog owners look like their dogs thing, and we see all of them. They kind of do that for a little bit, for like a second. It basically tries to bank on that, kind of in this middle portion, when it has nothing else to do, but for some reason it wants to be 2 hours and 15 minutes. So we just get that kind of stuff. But, I guess I could talk about Emma Stone. We're late enough into this video that I guess I can do that. What's great about this, I suppose, is that it might sound like it's sort of a territory right between, like I was talking about the Devil Wears Prada and the whole thing where it's like she might as well be Anne Hathaway and obviously Miranda Priestley as Emma Thompson. But another thing you can equate it to is Emma Stone's character in The Favorite. Kind of falls into the same territory as this as well. But there is one thing in particular that Emma Stone really brought to this, and I've been saying recently that apart from The Favorite, ever since like post La La Land, Emma Stone has kind of been an actress that's a bit too, like, I guess cold to me now. I always feel like she's one of those actresses now where you can just see her act, like you can visibly see her making her choices as she's acting, and that can be kind of off putting. Um, but she has she juggles the double personality as well as you could. But there's one scene in particular that she really needed to sell, or the entire last act of this movie was going to completely crumble. And I'm not a big fan of the movie overall, but I don't think it had completely fallen apart when we got to this point. And I will just say, without saying too much, or some people might think this is too much, so whatever, you've been warned, I guess. There is a twist that when it's first revealed was kind of like, oh, well, that's dumb. And it's like, well, first off, it's just like, if you were to be told there was a twist, then it'd be like, oh, yeah, of course it's that. And just the way that it adds up is, like, sloppy, but there's one scene that sells it. That Stone has to do, and it might be one of the better scenes. And this might sound like a stretch, given we're talking about Cruella, but honestly, the scene Emma Stone has to sell this story point to take us into the last act of the movie might be one of the better scenes of Stone's, like, career. So it's got that going for it. But then it goes right back into its stupid slapstick. She's wearing a fake mustache and stupid shit like that. But but before that, yeah, she really sold it. Yeah, as far as them doing like origin bullshit too, like the stuff you expect, like when Horace pulls up with a car and it's a DeVille and he says devil. He says devil. He says DeVille the wrong way and says devil, obviously. And we get a shot of her saying, "That's actually, like, I like that. I like the sound of that." It's literally the Fantastic Four bullshit. The say that again thing. That's what they're doing here as well. And and they also have some stuff that goes into a mid-credit scene as well. And I don't really know exactly what that was planning on setting up. That could either be we're in another world entirely, or Cruella in this has like the perceptive planning of the Batman vs Superman incarnation of Lex Luthor. Like either she's got a really elaborate plan that's going to get us back to square one, or it's in an entirely different universe than 101 Dalmatians. But they just happen to have all the same characters in it. But whatever. I don't know. So yeah, that moment as it turns into the third act could have been a sort of, I guess you can call it a make or break thing. I wasn't really that on board with the movie as a whole anyway, but it really easily could have absolutely crumbled, and it didn't. So the compliments are kind of light. So but I know a lot of people, like when the reactions started coming out at the start, a lot of people were into it, like actual critics and everything were actually quite into it. And there's that whole thing where, critics praise all Disney movies, which is definitely bullshit, but, like if they were going to go after this, they would have gone after this. But as far as I know, it's got a decent reaction, but I wasn't really I didn't really go in with any expectations. Like I wasn't expecting it to be like a horrible train wreck or anything. Like I said, in all of these, at the very least, these things have nice production values. Um, but as far as everything else, like I said, it's way too long. It doesn't need to be like three origin stories in one, most of which are stretched out for no reason. I think the only thing that I was like on board with going into this was Joel Fry and Paul Walter Hauser are like perfect casting for Jasper and Horace. And Joel Fry obviously plays Jasper a little like smoother and cooler than we're used to. Horace is still a fucking idiot, but um, as far as I remember, Jasper's kind of a fucking idiot too, like as we usually know him. So a bit of a smoother one is kind of jarring, but it's also kind of a nice contrast when you kind of see that back and forth between him and Horace, which is always there anyway. But it's like usually it's like they're two idiots, just one is slightly smarter. Um, Whereas the Jasper in this is actually kind of like actually clever and successful at what he tries. um, Actually, Horace isn't completely bumbling either. But he does still fail a lot. But yeah. Um, I guess if there's one more thing I was gonna point out was as far as these live action remakes go, I have no idea what's what apparently in regards to CGI, because when I saw young Cruella, like child Cruella, and I saw her dog, I was like, well, that's a weird like I mean you can it's not completely off, but it's like if I felt like you could tell it was animated. And then there's the Dalmatians later in that really crucial scene at the beginning that are definitely animated. And then there's another dog, Wink, I think his name was, Horace's dog. He seemed to be real, but the thing was a lot of the times the dogs look very animated, and I have made the mistake in the past of saying, "Oh my God, the CGI dogs look way too CGI." And one of the times I said that, apparently wrongly, was that live action Lady and the Tramp remake they did that you probably only just now remembered when I said that. I could have sworn the dogs in that movie were animated. The Lady and the Tramp one, I could have sworn those dogs were CGI, and then I learned later apparently they're not. So apparently I have no idea. Um, and those Dalmatians are definitely animated. I'm not sure about everything else though, but they looked like it. But maybe that's just I don't know the digital filming or something. So this was all over the place, but yet I feel like that's kind of the movie as well. So yeah, this could have been a lot worse, but it does have great production values, and all the praise you're probably hearing about the costumes is definitely warranted. Especially with how they're used in the movie, also. Like not necessarily just that they exist, but how they use in the movie is done in really creative ways, also, and is definitely the high point. That whole portion in the middle is the high point for sure. And everything else is just who cares. So I think that's all I really have to say about this one. So the next thing is going to be Spiral and Army of the Dead, like I said, or that could have been before this. I don't know what order these are going to go up, but until the next thing, I think that's it.